the last tube I want to talk about is the EL84, which is the little brother of the EL34. The EL84 is a smaller tube, but it also distorts very quickly. Um, it distorts even earlier when you turn up your volume. If you can imagine a smaller tube, you know, if an EL34 is maybe this tall, an EL84 is maybe that tall. And because of the size, if you're pumping the same amount of signal into the tube, a smaller tube is going to distort quicker.
So it's about 30% smaller.
I would say something like that.
Like the size of a EL34 is about the size of like the height of a cigarette lighter. Or a little
maybe
bigger.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And the EL84 is the sound of Vox amplifiers and pretty much the sound of the British invasion.
Okay.
Okay, the sound of the 60s British invasion. The sound you get from the Beatles, the 60s era Stones, the Yardbirds, and also Brian May, because Brian May always used Vox AC30 amplifiers.
Yeah, that's another legendary amplifier, right?
Actually, it is a legendary amplifier. It's just the only one who uses it really in a post-Marshall era still is Brian May. But when you had, for example, before Marshalls, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, all these guys, Clapton, they were all using Vox amplifiers, partially because they're a British amplifier and that was what was available to them in their country in the 60s. And, what they found, certainly Page and Beck in the Yardbirds found that if you turn that EL84 based Vox amp up, it sounded great. It distorted really easily and it sounded great. And everybody was, and by the way, Richie Blackmore was doing that too. And Richie Blackmore, long before he really let on, he was still using an AC30 in a lot of occasions when he was playing live. Even if he had like a Marshall on stage, it was for show, and he'd have like a Vox behind it or something like that he was running through on occasion. Anyway, the reason I bring up the EL84 in this context is because it's a very popular tube these days in these low wattage amps.
Okay.
So if you're buying a lunchbox based amp like an Orange Tiny Terror or something like that, or even like the Friedmans that are so popular these days, Friedman makes a 20 watt amplifier, and it's got EL84s in it. It's still a very British sound, but compared to an EL34 sound, it has less low end. Okay. And you're not going to really notice that unless you're A-Bing them back to back. It's one of those things where it's like if you don't have them both running in the room at the same time, you will think an EL84 amp sounds wonderful.
What was the other brand besides the Orange Tiny Terror that you mentioned?
Well, Friedman, but almost all of the small wattage amps that come out these days, like the lunchbox size amps, almost all of them, I think 98% of them, I would guess, use these tubes, EL84s. Okay. And they sound great. I'm not saying they don't. But if you plug in an EL34 amp right next to an EL84 amp, you will notice that the EL34 amp has a lot more low-end thump.
Right. But that's also because there's more power running through it, or is it a different reason?
I guess it's just, I'm not sure why that is exactly. I mean, I think the bigger tube can just produce more.
Right.
For some reason. I mean, don't quote me on that because I'm not, an electronics expert or anything like that. I just know that it's true because I've done it. I have both kinds of amps. And when I swapped out an EL84 amp for an EL34 amp, even at low wattage, I noticed the increase of low end.
Okay.